Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today we are doing another reaction video. Dave just never really stops. So as long as he keeps pushing out toxic content, I'm gonna keep pushing out reactions. Today's video is titled, harmlessly enough, 7 steps that can make you a millionaire in 12 years. This video has gotten Dave a lot of traction over the last few weeks. So I wanna see what are the secrets, let's unpack it, and let's figure out how we can become a millionaire in just seven easy steps. $19.95 plus shipping and handling. That's a joke because Dave's course is more expensive than that, and he gets to keep all of the money because he doesn't actually pay any of his instructors. You just do work out of the goodness of your heart because you want to give back. Okay, Dave, okay. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy videos like this, and let's go ahead and get into it.
And what's become famous around Ramsey was because many, many years ago, decades ago, people came to me and they said, what do you do first? Do you do retirement first, or do I do kids' college first? That's very important. Do I have an emergency fund first? That's really important. I need to get rid of this stupid credit card debt. It's 22%. That's very important. Where do I start? And what we did at the time, many years ago, was we laid it out, and then we adjusted it a couple times in the early days. We haven't adjusted it in 25 years. But we laid out what to do first, what to do second, and we call them the baby step.
Just starting off right off the bat with the bold admission that you haven't changed your advice in 25 years? 25 years, Dave. I would be embarrassed to admit that my views and my opinions and my advice didn't change in 25 years. That's almost as old as I am. I've changed my advice and my opinions and my outlook, and just also adapting my advice for the fact that life changes and the world changes and how people need to manage their money changes just in the last 2.5 years, nonetheless 10 times that amount of time. I don't understand how this is a brag. He talks about this all the time, that like he's been giving the same advice since the 90s, as if that's like bragging that his advice was so sound that there was no need to change it. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't make me have more trust in your advice. It makes me automatically think, this is gonna be outdated and not relevant and probably problematic, which makes sense. And even if we're not talking just like growing as a human being and changing your mind on things, whatever, but we're not living in the same economy as we were in the 90s. So therefore your advice and your tips on how to manage money would need to change, because what is going to help people financially 25 years ago is not going to be the same as it is today.
If you want to eat an elephant, you do it a bite at a time. So if you want to get control of your money, you do it a step at a time. Baby steps. Baby step 1 is you save $1,000 quickly. Little starter emergency fund. I have a
whole video on this and why I don't agree with this. It should have clicked with me that like this is 7 steps, they're the baby steps. So I think we're gonna be going through all of his baby steps, but my guess is he's gonna throw in a few curveballs there. This is such a good example of why not changing your advice in 25 years doesn't make any sense, because $1,000 in the 1990s is not the same as $1,000 today. Even if you didn't actually want to change your advice, you just wanted it to be the equivalent of what you've been saying, bump it up to $2,000. I still wouldn't agree with that, because my issue with recommending that people only have $1,000 in an emergency fund and then put all of your extra money towards your debt is I have heard time and time again from people that they followed Dave Ramsey's baby steps and it got them in a really bad financial position, because most emergencies are more than $1,000. Most people, that's more than their rent or mortgage payment, or that's more than like sometimes your car breaking down is going to cost you. So a lot of times if there's something that you're not financially prepared for, you need more than $1,000. And as we'll see if he's going through the baby steps, Dave Ramsey tells you to close all of your credit cards so you have no backup option for any extra money. And that puts people in a position where they have to go into debt again, which is really disheartening when you're on a debt-free journey like he's talking about, or they have no way of accessing the money that they need for emergencies and life-needing things that come up, because there are expenses that you just need to pay that sometimes you don't see coming. So my issue isn't to say that $1,000 isn't a lot of money, because it is a lot of money, objectively. But my issue is that with the way that his program works and how his baby steps works, it puts people in a vulnerable situation, and I'm not okay with that. And if you were saying $1,000 was enough almost 30 years ago, then it's no longer enough today. You should have bumped that up. But because he's so set in this idea of like, he's been right since the beginning, and this is the advice that has worked and therefore he should never change it, he's not willing to admit that you need to make some adjustments. Even if you wanted to stick by that doesn't make him wrong in the first place. He's just growing with inflation. But he doesn't want to do that, because he doesn't like to admit that he's ever wrong, ever. I don't think I've ever heard Dave admit that he's wrong in any of these videos. That's shocking. Because there have been times that I will go back and be like, oh yeah, this is what I used to say or used to think. I don't agree with that now. My views on this have changed. This is where like I differ in my opinion, even just over the last 2 years. So I feel like it's a big red flag that I've never once heard Dave admit to changing his mind about something or being wrong.
Once you've done that, and some of you just have that money, you just name it that just now. You already did baby step 1. You just reset that money in your mind over to the side. That's baby step 1. Baby step 2 is you pay off all of your debt except your home using the debt snowball. The debt snowball is where you list your debts, smallest to largest, pay minimum payments on everything but the little one. You attack the little one with a vengeance.
The debt snowball is fine. I'm pretty neutral on how people go about paying off their debt. If being debt-free is like what is most important to you. Yes, the debt snowball, technically, you're going to pay more money over time because with the debt snowball, you're paying off the smallest debt first and then going down until you hit the biggest debt, which could mean that you're paying off debts that have lower interest first and you're waiting until later to pay off debts with higher interest like credit cards or something. Not everything needs to be about maximizing your dollar along the way. The opposite to the debt snowball is the debt avalanche, where instead of paying off your smallest debt first, you would pay off the debt that has the highest interest rate. And the idea being that you're gonna pay less over time and therefore be able to pay off your debt quicker because you're hitting those debts that are costing you more money. If it keeps you motivated and if it works for you, that's fine. You know, do whatever works.
You're not going on vacation. You're in debt. You're broke. You're not going out to eat. You're in debt. You're broke. You work all the time. You're in debt. You're broke. There's a great place to go when you're broke, to work. Okay? This is what you do.
Why was that funny? I'm laughing because like I feel uncomfortable that she laughed at that. Because the implication there is like, oh, if you're in debt, you're just lazy and you're not working, so that's the place you need to go. You just need to go to work. That's some hating poor people shit, okay? Anyway, Dave doesn't actually believe this, right? Because Dave was so pissed at COVID and how the government was responding to it, having businesses and restaurants shut down or have to only do takeout orders. The fact that like 80 to 85% of people are in debt, Dave would be pissed and claim that millennials were ruining the economy if we all actually listened to his advice and like stopped eating out, stopped going on vacation, stopped spending extra money. Because he's a capitalist, and in order to uphold the system that he hangs onto so closely, you need people spending money. And since a lot of people can't even afford basic necessities, the system crumbles if they're not continuing to spend money on other things as well. So he doesn't actually believe this, he just uses this to shame people and to make you feel bad about enjoying minor little day-to-day luxuries. Because if you're poor, you're just lazy, you need to go to work, despite the fact that most people, in order to even just like be able to afford to live, especially if you're working a minimum wage job, you have to work more than 40 hours. Most people have like 2 jobs in order to be able to figure that out. So it's this whole myth of poor people just being lazy, it's so overdone. It's so overdone by Dave because he's like the person really running that campaign. And it's just so not true, and we know that and we have statistics on it, but it's just infuriating to see as he's getting all of these other co-hosts on and they're just perpetuating the same shit so that whenever, sooner or later, when he decides to retire, he has younger, more hip people spewing the same ableist bullshit that he's been spewing since the beginning.
And you bust your butt, and it's scorched earth, no lifestyle. No nothing. You sell so much stuff the kids think they're next. You name the dog eBay and the cat Craigslist. Everything's going out the door. We're getting this mess cleaned up. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Dave uses that, like, that's like one of his things. Gazelle intensity, credit scores are an I love debt score, sell so much stuff that kids think they're next. And I know it's like a joke, but it's kind of gross. It's always grossed me out. Even when I started off not as a Dave hater, okay? That's how I got into personal finance, was watching tons of Dave Ramsey content. By watching more and more of his content, I was like, this is not sitting right to me. And that's when I started unearthing just how deep the unethical shit goes with him. But always from the beginning when he would say that, I was like, that's... But the implication that like, you need to give up absolutely everything that you love in order to reach this pinnacle of debt freedom in the way that Dave thinks that you should, and that if you're not giving up all of these extra things with this level of intensity, you're doing it wrong, or you're just lazy, or you're not committed enough. And if you're not like selling off everything, that the kids are getting like worried about what the fuck is going on here because you've completely changed our life around whenever you started listening to this man, as if that's not culty sounding at all. It's interesting. And this is why his advice frustrates me so much, is that he presents it as very black and white, and there's so much in between. Like, even if you want to be debt-free, even if you want to be debt-free very quickly, and you are willing to give up a lot of those extra things, it's not a one or the other kind of thing. There is a way for you to figure out a way to manage your money that works for you long term, that doesn't go into this kind of diet mentality of like restrict, 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 restrict for a very short period of time, quote unquote, even though it's not a very short period of time, and we'll get into that, to be able to live this life that you love later on. But those aren't the only two options. Like, if you're wanting to stick by the idea of like managing money is going to fix all of your financial problems, which I don't believe, and I think is a really toxic narrative to be spewing out there. I think personal finance can provide people with such life-changing information and independence, because a lot of us were never taught how to manage our money, but I don't think it's the end all be all when we have a system that is set up to make the majority of people struggle with their finances in order for like the top 1 to 5% to flourish off of all of our stolen labor. But anyway, even if you want to go off of that, there's still a balance that can be had there, and there's still a healthy way to do it that teaches long-term strategies rather than this restrict and then you'll be good. You're good to go. Then you're rich and fine.
People that do it with that intensity get out of debt in an average of about 18 to 24 months. Now, average means that some of you have $500,000 of student loan debt like Jade did, took her 7 years.
Okay, this was exactly my point. This is not a short amount of time. 18 to 24 months? 2 years on average? I don't know how he is calculating average, but if that's the median, another half, almost half of people are spending more than 2 years in this Gazelle intensity. Has anyone tried to do this for a month? Because even like no spend challenges for a month, people fail and people feel like failures trying to do. Being in this, I can't enjoy life until I get out of this, it's like, I'm totally fine if that's what someone wants to do, but trying to sell it like that's the only option or that's the only smart option, which is what he does, doesn't sit right with me at all. And also, let's not forget that this entire time, for these around a year and a half to 2+ years, he's expecting you to only have $1,000 on hand for emergencies. I last month had an emergency that was more than $1,000. And I still have student loan debt, so if I was following Dave Ramsey's advice, I would have been screwed and not been able to pay for my car to be fixed. But if that were the case, I also couldn't go out and buy a new car because I wouldn't have any money saved for a new car, and Dave doesn't believe in taking out any more loans. Then his whole system starts to crumble, right? Because then if I had a typical job where I had to drive to work, what am I supposed to do? Because you're claiming that people who are in debt and poor are just lazy and don't want to work. But if I want to get to work, I need a car. But in order to have a car, I would have needed more than $1,000. Or I would have needed to get, which I still would have needed more than $1,000, probably for like a down payment. Or I would have needed to get a new car. But in order to get a new car, you would say that I need to wait because I'm in debt, and that trying to get a new car would just, like a new, not even a new, but like a new to me car would just be the pinnacle of luxury that I haven't earned yet. But then without either of those two things, I would be able to get to work. It's just so frustrating because I don't know how you go through the system without having a warped sense of your worth, and without at some point encountering thinking that you're a failure or that you're just not trying hard enough, because you're gonna encounter these things along the way.
And then average means some of you have $5,000 in debt and $10,000 in your bank account when you heard me rant, and you just went and paid it off. Now you're debt free. Took you 13 seconds. Okay, but the average is 18 to 24 months. Then when you finish that with the same level of intensity, you continue. We call this Gazelle intensity, the gazelle running from the cheetah for its life. When you get out of debt, you finish baby step 3 with the Gazelle intensity, and that's 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Okay, so we're actually intense for even more than the 1.5 to 2 years. Then you also have to be intense building up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, which is a lot of money. Dave has also said multiple times, I've heard him less and less say this, but his big thing used to be the only time you should see the inside of a restaurant if you're in debt is if you're working there. Completely ignoring the fact that most people who are in these positions and who are in debt, most of it is medical debt. Most people who are struggling with a lot of debt, it's medical debt or it's student loans. Two things that people should have never been made to go into debt for in the first place. But most people, this is like, living that way isn't an option. But if you ask him what you're supposed to do in those situations, I've heard people call in and he just blames you. Like, He will not acknowledge systemic oppression. So if you call in saying like, I can't do this, here's all the things that I've tried, this is not possible for me to get another job, it's not possible for like this, and this, he will find a way to make you feel like it's your fault. Rather than just acknowledging that personal finance has its limits. Money management has its limits, and not everything is within someone's control. But not once have I ever heard Dave say that, which doesn't make any sense to me. Well, I mean, it makes sense to me because he's a raging capitalist conservative, but it doesn't make sense to me in the sense that like, me admitting to you, hey, there's only so far that personal finance and budgeting and debt payoff tips can get someone. There's also all of these underlying things that are out of your control and aren't a personal choice. Doesn't discredit any of like the personal finance advice that I give. It exists, it coexists with each other, right? We can acknowledge that in a lot of ways, giving people the education that they need and deserve to feel confident with money is important and is a systemic issue, because there is a reason that a lot of us are not taught how to manage our money. While also acknowledging that sometimes it's more than money management. It wouldn't undo anything that he's saying, other than the fact that he would just have to admit that his program isn't the end all be all, which I don't see why that's an issue. No one should feel like their program is the only thing that will work for everyone. That's like saying a single book is going to be for everyone. It could be like the highest rated, most amazing book in the world, but it's not gonna be for everyone, and that's okay. It's not supposed to be.
Then we turn off the intensity and we move from intensity to intentionality, and we do baby steps 4, 5, and 6 simultaneously. That's 15% of your income going into retirement. That's what's going to make you a baby steps millionaire in about 12 years following this plan. You're going to put money into kids' college if that's applicable and you didn't sell them off. Baby step 6 is any other money we can find in the budget we're going to throw at the house, and the average person paying off their house following these baby steps is doing it. We've been doing this for 30 years. Is doing it in about 10.2 years. In our Baby Steps Millionaires study we did of millionaires, some of them had followed our stuff, some of them hadn't. They were doing it in about 11 years.
Wow.
So, but the point is there's an intensity for that first 3 steps to get out of debt and get your emergency fund in place, because until you do that, you're broke. And you're walking around in a culture, strutting around like you got some money. You got no money. Shut up. You're broke.
This is like a 30-year plan. I don't think I've ever really like put those numbers together in my head, which is like fine. It's totally fine if it takes you multiple decades, but like most people don't have that long. Interesting. We don't have time to unpack all of that. Okay, I gotta think about that. I just don't understand his definition of broke. Like, what is it? Is it having debt that makes you broke? But then in my mind, if I had $20,000 in my savings, which would grant me a huge emergency fund and a lot of financial freedom. But then I also have my, let's say my $60,000 in student loans, which are very low interest and currently no interest, and I'm not even having to make payments on them. I would feel more broke if I put $19,000 of that $20,000 toward my student loans, had about $40,000 in student loans and $1,000 in an emergency fund. That would feel like broke to me. That would make me feel not financially secure. Whereas like before, I would feel good and I would be in a really good position where I would know that if emergencies came up, if I lost my job, if something happened with my income, if I had a big medical thing come up, I would have some wiggle room to be able to address that. The only difference would be that I would be $60,000 in student loan debt rather than 40. That doesn't affect my feeling of being broke. So I just don't understand like what his definition is of being broke. If I had $0 in student loans, but only $1,000 in an emergency fund, am I still broke? Well, I guess so. Then, okay, once I have no debt and a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, am I no longer broke? Because that's when he says you can stop being Gazelle intense. Where is the line? Who are these broke, lazy people who just don't know how to manage their money? And I just don't see how if you're struggling with debt and managing your money, how someone yelling at you that you're stupid and broke is going to help. I talked about this in a couple of videos this last few times. I just don't get it. Like, I don't get this like tough love brand of personal finance. Most people who are struggling with their money know that they are struggling with their money. Whether it is in your control or outside of your control. Maybe you are just overspending and you know it and you feel so out of control with money and you know that you should have enough money, but you just keep spending. There's clearly something there. It's not that you're just lazy or stupid or you just don't care at all, because most people want to feel financially secure. That grants us so much freedom in life and so much less stress. So it's not just a you thing. There's something deeper going on there, right? And this tough love brand of personal finance doesn't get down to like, what is going on? What's causing this? What is deeper than just this behavior? Because there's something causing behaviors. Dave doesn't want to acknowledge that. He just wants to put people into a box of broke, lazy, and stupid, or rich, successful, and incredible, and smart, and intelligent, and obviously the hardest working people out there.
Quit acting like you're something. You're broke. And this putting on the crap has got to stop. And Jade, you've been hearing this thing in baby step 2 where people are struggling with motivation.
Yeah, I get it all the time, Dave. They go in my DMs, direct message, even in our Financial Peace University class. I get the same question, which is, Jade, you guys did this for 7.5 to 8 years. How do you stay motivated?
I love talking about motivation. I posted a whole video on what motivation looks like when it comes to managing your money with ADHD. So this I'm actually really excited about. And I feel like we haven't heard her talk, so I'm excited to see what she says.
At first, Dave, I would kind of give like the nice answer, like, well, you gotta connect to your why and all of this. And I really got to thinking about it. And I was talking to Sam about it. And the more people ask me, it kind of frustrates me because there's got to be no other option.
Y'all don't get Jade frustrated, okay?
There's
got a bad idea.
When Sam and I were getting out of debt, there was no option to not do it. It's a must. I have to. My life will never be what I need it to be, what it should be, what God wants it to be if I don't do this. So this idea that, well, maybe I'll do it and maybe I won't, that cannot exist.
It's not an intellectual exercise.
It's not an exercise. You've got to...
It's an emotional, visceral decision.
Yes, I must. It's got to, and nobody can do that for you. You listen to this show or you come to a live event and we'll light that match for you.
That's not addressing motivation. I understand what she's saying with like connect to your why, and I used to say this a lot too, right? And I still believe that it's important to like have a reason why this is worth it to you and to kind of your touchstone to come back on, but that's not addressing motivation. Motivation goes so much deeper than that. Especially like I talked about this when it comes to neurodivergent people. It's not about a want or a desire or a lack of desire to do something. It's not about not realizing how important doing something is. I know that it is incredibly important for my health to, for example, go get my annual checkup at my doctor. It's not that I don't want to do that. And it's not that I don't recognize how important that is. And I feel like shit when I feel like I want to do it, but I can't. I watched a video one time, and if I remember what it was, I feel like it was a TikTok, but if I can find it, I'll link it. But she was talking about motivation and ADHD specifically, but I feel like a lot of people can really relate to this, especially neurodivergent people or people who struggle with this kind of thing. If you go to try to put your hand on a hot stove, if you tell yourself, I'm gonna touch that stove, it does not matter how much you want to do it, your brain will stop you from physically doing that action. Even if you are telling your hand, touch that stove, do it, touch it, I want to touch the stove, it doesn't matter. Your brain is like, absolutely not, hell no, we're not touching that stove. It is that same thing with motivation when it comes to ADHD. It is not the desire, it is not the lack of why, or it's not being lazy. It is your brain. And I know specifically this is like neurodivergent, but a lot of people really struggle when it comes to, it's not a lack of wanting to do something, it's something else. So just saying there can be no other option that's not advice. And it doesn't address motivation at all. And what are the roadblocks to the desire for people to change and actually changing? Which is what people are asking when they're asking her this question. When people are saying, I can't find the motivation, a lot of times it's because we've already internalized that we're lazy and it's our fault, and that if we're not doing something, it's because of a lack of motivation, but that's not actually what motivation is. Because if it was just as easy as, well, there just can be no other option, there would be like no poor people or very, very few people who are struggling. You cannot tell me that 80 to 85% of people are just lazy and lack motivation. But Dave Ramsey's entire franchise is held up by this idea that people are inherently lazy and stupid, and that they need someone else to come in and berate them about this and kick their ass into gear. So of course he has to hire people on who uphold those same beliefs.
But you've got to like stoke your own flame. My buddy Lucas did a talk about this. He said, you could be a spark or you can be a flame. And you can tell the difference by when the wind blows. Ooh. If you're a spark, the wind blows, immediately you go out. Just like that. But if you're a flame, when the wind blows, you get bigger, you get more aggressive, you get larger and more fierce. And if you're talking to me and you're asking me, how can I stay more motivated? I'm sorry to tell you, you're a spark. You're just a little fluttering spark, and you've got to do what it takes.
She just called you people names.
You're just a tiny, little, insignificant, stupid, lazy spark. Just say it. Come on. Just say what you mean. Dave Ramsey does it. He'd love if you did it. Just tell people that you think they're lazy and stupid. We're just sparks. Can I get, oh my God, if I had merch, I would absolutely have merch about being a spark.
You're just a little spark.
You little wimpy spark.
And the moment the wind blows, man, the minute you have to dip into your emergency fund, the minute something happens, you're ready to go, well, I don't know if I want to do it. I don't know if it's worth it to me.
I tried that Ramsey stuff. It doesn't work.
What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know if it's worth it to you?
Maybe because you tell people to only have $1,000 in an emergency fund, and then when an emergency happens, that's literally all of their money, and who wouldn't feel upset about that? Even I have a substantial emergency fund now, and even the setback on having to spend like $1,200 on my car still felt like I was still like, this sucks. Like for a second it's like, oh my God. But then it's also a nice feeling because I know that my emergency fund is doing what it's supposed to do. And I remember that feeling of having to put that on a credit card that I couldn't pay off instead. But it's not a bad thing for people to feel dissuaded by shitty things happening. We're humans. Of course we do.
Do you want to change your life or not? It's that simple. If you're waiting to feel motivated, you will be waiting forever because that is completely mythological.
Motivation is not an external substance.
No, it doesn't come from out there to take you in.
From in here, yeah. And
No. Motivation can absolutely be external. In fact, that's what I talked about a lot in my video on ADHD motivation. For a lot of neurotypical people, what they're saying can be true. That like, it is setting goals and it's the inherent internal idea of wanting to reach these goals that can effectively help you engage in those behaviors. But for a lot of neurodivergent people, that's not true. It's a lot of times external factors. It's due dates. That's why a lot of times we procrastinate and then we do all of our work the last minute, but we get a lot of shit done because we're really highly motivated by that due date. It's turning things into competition, which is an external factor. It can be turning things into a game, which is an external factor. But that doesn't make it a bad thing. Motivations being external rather than internal doesn't make them inherently less valid.
you know, one of the things I've kind of run into this over the years of me teaching it too, the same frustration. Blake Thompson, our old producer, he now runs all of Ramsey Networks.
Yeah.
He used to do these comedy bits, and he created this comedy bit that we would play on the air called Detonol. And it was a pill you could take that would get you out of debt. If you just took this pill, you'd be out of debt. And that's what everybody's looking for. They're looking for a
magic
pill. You know, I was wandering in the vitamin aisle, and I ran into one of my pastor friends who's kind of loud, and he yells down the aisle, "Ramsey, there's no pill on there that's going to help you. You got to eat less."
Ignoring the diet comment, which actually not ignoring the diet comment because that is as valid as this pill analogy. Why is it such a bad thing that people just want to be able to snap their fingers and not have to deal with this shit? We live in a system where people have to struggle to make ends meet to afford basic human needs. Why is it so wrong that people don't want to have to do that and wish so much that they could just wake up tomorrow and not have to worry about those things and can just live and be human and spend their time connecting with people and doing things that bring them joy and working in a way that feels purposeful and makes them feel like they are in control over the work and what they're doing. Why is that such a bad fucking thing? I don't understand. You're telling me, Dave, that when you were at the beginning of your journey, if someone was like, hey, sorry, as I was making those connections here, I realized, oh wait, Dave, that is what you did. You did take the magic pill that got you out of debt because you filed bankruptcy. Poof! Start over. I want to make it very clear to people that I'm being facetious and that I totally understand that filing bankruptcy is not just like the easiest thing in the world, and that oftentimes when people have to file bankruptcy, it's because they're on their last end and they're in a really bad position and it's not something that they're excited to be doing. My point is, Dave's pissed that people want a magic button that they can push to just redo and start over, and he literally pushed that fucking button. Whew, whatever point I was gonna make, not as good as that one. Glad I put that together.
So good. It's so true. Y'all want the magic pill that's gonna magically make this easy.
It ain't gonna be easy.
It doesn't exist.
Let me tell you what easy is. Easy's when you finish.
Finish what, Dave? Finish what? Why do I have to spend 45 fucking years to be able to just live the life that I should have been able to live in the first place? Why does shit have to be so fucking hard? It should not have to be this hard. And I don't understand why it's a bad thing that people are like, hey, it should not be this fucking hard. Everything was supposed to be easier and more beautiful and more fulfilling than this bullshit.
But let me tell you this. I mean, there's the other side of that where people go, man, this is hard. Right?
Yeah,
Paying off debt's
learn
hard.
to do
Working
hard.
is hard.
You wuss, learn to do hard.
But can I just say, what is also hard is not being able to afford groceries. Man, that's hard. That's hard. When you look up and you don't have the money to take care of your kids, you don't have the money to spin the gas to go visit a loved one in the hospital. I'm talking about myself. That was hard. That's hard to stomach because that reflects back on you and you go, oh my God, I've been an idiot with money.
No, oh my God, we're so close to the point. And that was the first time that I've ever watched a Dave Ramsey thing where I felt genuine emotion from someone. Like, you can feel that she's been there. They get so close to the point and then they just veer off in the other direction. The point should be, you should have never had to choose between those things. You shouldn't have to worry that you don't have enough money to go visit someone in the hospital. You shouldn't worry that you don't have enough money to pay for a roof over your head or to get groceries or to pay off a medical expense. The conclusion there is that that should not be a thing. Not that you were just lazy and stupid with money. And it breaks my heart that you can feel all of that emotion and then it's like that clicks off when it was like, oh, I was just like so lazy and I knew that I was being stupid and making all these stupid decisions. We're so close. Face first into the point and they still miss it. And it genuinely, this is why I talk about and speak out against this bullshit that he puts out. Because of situations like that. Because we turn people who have been through that shit into people who hate people who have been through that shit. You've been there, but somewhere along the way, someone convinced you it was your fault. Someone convinced you that you just weren't working hard enough, that you were broken, that you were just bad at managing money. And then that turns into this ideology where we cycle through hating poor people again, rather than actually working to dismantle the systems that uphold that shit in the first place. And it sucks. It sucks. And I talk to people every single day who have done Dave Ramsey's full thing. People who have been like the FPU, the Financial Peace University instructors, who were in this and then started to see the cracks in the foundation. And when they got out, they were like, oh my God, I felt like shit. And I was treating people like shit. And I viewed poor people like shit. I'm gonna be done with that. I don't really care how they end that. I just wish that we weren't perpetuating the same shit to another generation. Because now I see young people on TikTok and on YouTube spewing the same lie that it's a personal fault rather than looking at it as a systemic issue. There are Dave's baby steps. Are we all millionaires now? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.